United States, which is furious at being cut off from the riches of Burkina Faso, cannot tell us what to do.
Right now, it seems like the entire Western world wants Ibrahim Traore out of the picture. But why are they so desperate to eliminate him? Traore, who is the current president of Burkina Faso, has survived more assassination attempts in a short span of time than almost any other leader in recent history.
Oh, the president of Burkina Faso will soon be killed. As of the 4th of April 2025, he has already survived about 18 assassination attempts, but they are not going to stop anytime soon until they get it done. So yes, he will soon be killed.
And it's clear more attempts are coming. To understand why they're after him so badly, we have to look back at some of the African leaders who were assassinated before him and the reasons why they were assassinated. Only then will the puzzle start coming together. Our story begins on a Thursday in June 1960, which till today some people say that it was the best Thursday ever for the people of DRC. A young man, just 34 years old, by the name of Patrice Lumumba, stood up to give a speech that 6 months later cost him his life. Standing before dignitaries and politicians, including King Baudouin of Belgium, from which the then Republic of the Congo had just won its independence, the young Patrice Lumumba gave a rousing, somewhat unexpected speech that sent fear and anxiety among the Europeans. He said,
"We experienced the sarcasm, the insults, the blows we had to endure morning, noon, and night because we were black. Who will forget that a black person was addressed as tu, not like a friend, but because the honorable vous was reserved only for whites."
What we have suffered in our bodies and minds from colonial oppression, we tell you, all that is now over.
He said, "No Congolese worthy of the name will ever be able to forget that it was by fighting that our independence has been won. Slavery was imposed on us by force." He continued, while the King of Belgium looked on in shock. "We remember the blows that we had to submit to morning, noon, and night. With independence," Lumumba said, "the country's future was finally in the hands of its own people. We shall show the world what the black man can do when working in liberty, and we shall make the Congo the pride of Africa." That speech on its own was a major threat to European powers. They wanted an African leader who was a puppet, someone they could control, someone who would allow them to continue exploiting Africa's raw materials, just like during colonialism. But Patrice Lumumba wasn't one of those, and we'll get deeper into that in a minute. But just so you know how powerful Lumumba was, even Malcolm X once called him the most influential black man to ever walk the African continent. Now, things escalated when Patrice Lumumba turned to the Soviet Union, today's Russia, for help in conflicts happening in the mineral-rich region, a move that made European countries and the United States furious. And fast forward to January 17, 1961, just 6 months after taking power, Patrice Lumumba's life was brutally ended by Congolese men with the help of Belgian forces and with the tacit approval of the United States. I'll leave a link to an Al Jazeera article about this assassination in the description if you want to go deep into this. But for now, I want you to remember this: a young leader wanting Congo's mineral wealth to help his people, insecurity issues on the mineral-rich side of the country increasing, and him turning to Russia for help. Now, our second story takes us to Burkina Faso, to one of Africa's greatest presidents of all time, Thomas Sankara. Again, just a young man, full of bigger dreams for his people. When Sankara came to power, he issued salary cuts across the board, including for himself. He scrapped the fleet of luxury Mercedes-Benzes for government officials, replacing them with small Renault 5 cars. He nationalized land and oil wealth and made the masses so happy, but the country's elite were mad about this. Decades of inequality that benefited them were being crushed. On the global stage, Sankara criticized the injustices of globalization, the financial system, the role of the IMF and the World Bank, and the crushing debt on third world countries. He called out the Western agenda, some of which I won't dive into today because I want to stay focused on today's topic. He built ties with Cuba, sending disadvantaged youth to study there, and returned to develop Burkina Faso. And since Cuba was close with the Soviet Union, it was seen as if he built strong ties with the Soviet Union as well. He denounced U.S. support for Israel and apartheid South Africa. He called on African countries to boycott the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. At the United Nations, he demanded an end to the great power veto rights, supported Palestine, Western Sahara, the Sandinistas, and the ANC. But Sankara was only 37 when, on October 15, 1987, he and 12 others were gunned down. According to testimonies, his assassination was orchestrated by former Liberian President Charles Taylor, with the support of the French and American governments, and executed by Sankara's former friend Blaise Compaoré, who would rule Burkina Faso for the next 27 years. Our next case study takes us to Libya. You all know what happened to MuamMar Gaddafi.
My mission is to encourage my brothers and wake up the African peoples to unify our continent, Africa.
At one point, he even collaborated with the CIA on some missions. But when time came, they turned on him, tarnished his name, and took him out. But what many don't tell you is how much Gaddafi had done for Libya. He built Africa's best housing and medical care system. He made sure the oil wealth benefited the people. Education was compulsory and totally free, and if you needed a course that wasn't available at home, the government paid for you to study abroad. Gaddafi also dreamed of uniting Africa into a strong, independent continent. But once again, that dream was too dangerous for the Western powers. They demonized him before orchestrating his brutal public execution in 2011. And our latest victim, Tanzanian President John Pombe Magufuli. Although many mysteries still surround his death, what we do know is that he was pushing an agenda of putting Tanzanians first, cutting off old colonial ties that kept Tanzania's minerals under foreign control. He rejected exploitative loans, insisting Tanzania could develop without sinking into debt traps. But not long after that, we woke up to the heartbreaking news that he was gone. Now, if you've been paying attention, there's a pattern here. Young African leader rises up, sees the exploitation built into colonial systems, wants to end it. Then insecurity starts rising in the country, turns to Russia for partnerships instead of Europe or America. And then he gets eliminated. To fully understand this, we need to remember why the Europeans colonized Africa in the first place. They came to control resources. They needed cheap minerals. They needed a market to dump their outdated products. That's why today you still see school donations of old, unusable computers. Or why so many new railroads are made with old technology. Refurbished trains bought secondhand from Europe. When Europeans left Africa officially, they made sure they left behind leaders they could control, leaders who would keep the colonial structures running. To this day, Africa still ships out raw materials cheaply, still gets flooded with secondhand goods, still stays under control. Meanwhile, countries like the United States and Australia with other countries that were also once colonies, once they did away with the colonial structures, rebuilt their countries on their own terms and came up with different codes that don't rely on their colonial masters. They ended up becoming world powers. Africa that still relies on the same system is still struggling. Today, the US has joined hands with European countries to control Africa again, using soft power, military influence, and economic traps. Now let's bring it back to Ibrahim Traore. Burkina Faso is a very rich country. It's rich in minerals like gold, vanadium, nickel, phosphates, iron, manganese, and more. Minerals that are critical for today's electronics and booming EV market. It's the top 4 producer of gold in Africa, but despite that, Burkina Faso is far from the richest country on the continent. Because, just like the DRC, their resources were bleeding out to foreign companies while the local people suffered. When Traore came to power, he started canceling big mining deals with European and American companies. He wanted contracts that benefit his people, because after all, the minerals are theirs. He's challenging old colonial agreements that tied Burkina Faso's wealth and even its currency to its former colonizers. He kicked out the French military, and he's working with neighboring countries like Mali and Niger to reduce US influence, even closing down one of America's biggest bases in the region. And yes, just like the others, these countries are now turning to Russia for military and economic support. If you've been following the case studies, this story follows the same exact script. A young visionary leader wants prosperity for his people, challenges colonial structures, wants minerals to serve his people, faces rising insecurity, and much of its sponsor turns to Russia. Then comes propaganda, and finally, the assassination. A lot of the insecurity you see is artificially sponsored by those who don't want him in power, used as an excuse to keep foreign soldiers in Africa and maintain mineral control. When it comes to why such African leaders turn to Russia, you have to know that unlike Western nations, Russia never colonized Africa. It supported anti-colonial movements, opposed apartheid, and engaged in mutually beneficial trade. The West fears losing control over Africa's resources, especially as the US seeks alternatives to Chinese mineral supplies. Traore's defiance threatens their grip, and history shows what happens next. The question is, will Burkina Faso's people protect him? Will they see through the propaganda? Or will he become another tragic case study in the long war against Africa's true independence?